All right, you see, this is why I hate riding with a large group. Everybody has their own little opinions and it all gets homogenized and you lose the whole edge of it. I'm going with Jerk Store. Jerk Store is the line. Jerk Store. Yes.
Righto, boys and girls, today we're going to learn the push jerk. The plan for this video is to leave no stone unturned and go through this movement in more detail than we have for any previous movement. Before we go into the finer details of the movement, I want to help you develop a good understanding of how the push jerk works. I find it much easier to coach and correct a movement when the athlete has a good understanding of the concept of what's going on. In simple terms, the function of the push jerk is to lift more weight overhead than we could by using the smaller muscle groups of the upper body in isolation. Essentially, what is happening in the push jerk is that the athlete is imparting momentum to the bar with the rapid extension of the hips and knees in order to separate the load of the bar from the body, in turn allowing the athlete to retreat under the bar and finish the lift with the big muscle groups of the lower body. If we start from the ground, the feet are hip width, the glutes are engaged, and the ribs are locked down, so much so that I should be able to punch the athlete in the stomach without causing any discomfort. The jerk rack position is basically a compromise between achieving enough protrusion of the deltoids to support the weight of the bar while keeping the forearms vertical enough so that the transition overhead is still efficient. One of the most common problems I encounter when coaching the push jerk is athletes having their grip too narrow. This could be because they have a narrow grip on the clean and haven't readjusted their grip before the jerk, or it may be that they are just trying to put themselves in a position where they feel strong in pushing the bar. Either way, we need to remember that the jerk is less about pushing the bar up than it is about pushing the body into the receiving position. Widening the grip will also help with less mobile athletes receiving the bar in what is essentially a shallow overhead squat. Normally the first thing I'll do when teaching the execution of the push jerk is to perform the footwork without the bar. The focus here is having the athlete realise the difference between the upright position of the dip and the more squat-like mechanics of the receiving position. Most people will have the tendency to dip either too deep or forward or too fast, and this will create a snowball effect of problems later in the movement. One of the ways to fix a forward inclination is to have the athlete visualise a brick wall right in front of their nose, or, if need be, put a PVC pipe in front of them as a more physical cue. The next thing to do is to get the bar in the rack position and practice the dip drive in isolation. Try to think of a spring being compressed and released. We want a slow and controlled dip with an aggressive exit where the bar floats off the shoulders to highlight the fact that we're pushing the bar with the body and not the arms. If all is going well at this point, it's time to put the full movement together. Remember that we are trying to use the power of the legs to do the bulk of the work, and any pushing with the arms should be about getting the body into the receiving position. As discussed earlier, one of the most common problems is forward inclination of the dip. This can be caused by lack of flexibility, moving too quickly, or going too deep. This will cause the weight of the bar to roll onto the arms, where the athlete is much more likely to try and muscle the bar overhead, as well as a lot of wasted energy going forwards instead of straight up. If the bar is propelled forward, generally one of two things will happen. The athlete will jump forward to catch the bar over their centre of gravity, or they will fail the rep due to catching the bar in a weak position. Either way, both of these problems can easily be avoided by paying more attention to the start of the movement. Next up, we have the star jump push jerk. The athlete in this case either doesn't understand the movement from a conceptual point of view or doesn't have the physical self-awareness to know that they are not receiving the bar correctly. The main problem here is that there is no advantage created through the movement of the feet, and secondly, the athlete is missing out on the shock-absorbing effect that rebending the hips and knees creates. Moving on, we have an athlete who is receiving the bar in the dip. Please realise that the dip at the start of the movement and the receiving position have different mechanics. You'll often hear coaches say dip and re-dip, but this is technically incorrect. The receiving position is essentially a shallow squat. An athlete that receives the bar in the dip has no way of creating more depth as the load increases due to the limitations of ankle flexibility, as well as limiting the involvement of the big muscle groups like the glutes and hamstrings. A good way to rectify this situation is to have the athlete visualise an object behind them that they're going to try to hit their backside into immediately after reaching full extension from the dip drive. If this fails, go back to the jump and land mentioned at the start of the video and place an object like a PVC pipe behind the athlete so that they can physically work towards making contact with something. The muscled push jerk. In this case, the athlete is instigating the movement as though they are going to perform a push jerk, but continues to push the bar overhead rather than pushing the body under the bar. This is obviously a problem as the athlete is limited to lifting weights that are within the abilities of what they can press rather than what they can receive. I'm sure you've all performed lifts where you feel like your feet are glued to the ground and that the only way to finish those lifts is to continue to press. To explain this, it's time to get all geeky. If you did high school physics, you'll recall that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So in this case, whilever the athlete is pushing against the bar is exerting the exact same amount of force back at the athlete, thus making it very hard for the athlete to move their feet and retreat under the bar. There's a variety of ways to coach this out of an athlete. Firstly, have the athlete imagine that they're lifting in a room with a low ceiling height and that the only way they're going to get their arms to full extension is to get under the bar. If they continue to push up, they're going to put holes in the ceiling. Another method is to hold a PVC pipe above their bar and instruct them not to hit their barbell into the PVC. This method works amazingly well as it gives a visual and physical cue to the athlete. Finally, don't hesitate to get the athlete back in the rack position and practice the dip drive in isolation where you can focus on the bar floating off the shoulders rather than being pushed by the arms. The last fault that we're going to tackle in this video is the no rack push jerk. In this instance, the athlete is supporting the weight of the bar with the arms rather than their shoulders. This is a common fault with athletes who are new to the rack position or with flexibility issues, and there are a number of faults associated with this. The first one is that the transference of power from the body to the bar is lost due to the slack in the system. Because of this slack, as the athlete changes direction from the dip to the drive or from the down to the up, the barbell will want to keep travelling in that same direction. The second one is that because the athlete is bearing the weight of the bar in the arms, they are much more likely to push with the arms rather than the body, thus causing all of the same faults we have already covered in the muscled push jerk. The third one is that because the weight of the bar is well in front of the athlete's centre of balance, the bar is more likely to pull the athlete forward in the dip. That is all for this edition of Fitter Every Day. As always, we hope that this video has been helpful, and if you got something positive out of it, please share it with your friends and subscribe to our channel.